Yeah, and then this one can just be just about that much. I don't get to cut a lot of things with the scissors anymore.
Do you have to specify with scissors? Do you cut a lot of things with, like...
I cook.
Chopping is different than cutting.
Something satisfying about the sound it makes.
Alright, this is an ASMR. Don't give them what they're not paying for.
Oh, that's true. That should do it. Oh, yeah. Much better. Oh, it just says, hi, Hugo.
We're just big Charlie Chaplin fans. Hi, everyone! Hello, everyone. I'm Hugo.
I'm Jake.
And this is reading 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson.
Chapter 10.
Be precise in your speech, which is interesting considering what we've highlighted previously in this series, where Jordan Peterson will intentionally be sort of vague, at the very least, about prescriptive claims, in the sense that he will say things like, oh, women shouldn't wear makeup, but then not say,
he'll say,
why.
Should women wear makeup in the workplace?
And imply that they should not, but without saying they shouldn't.
Yeah.
He's not being precise there, so...
Yeah, so this chapter, I think,
more so than the others,
is the least entertaining. He basically says everything he's going to say in, like, the first paragraph, aside from some other stuff, is basically, like, the same argument he's going to be making the whole time. He's going to be talking about a marriage. He's using a marriage falling apart as the lattice work on which to discuss be precise in your speech, but really... It should just be called Talk About Your Problems, I guess.
Yeah.
So, I don't even know if we can break this up into sections, but we'll do our best. This is section 1.
Part takes about a page and a half, is called Why Is My Laptop Obsolete? I'll just summarize this because there weren't any particular quotes that stuck out to me. Essentially what he's doing is setting groundwork for the rest of the chapter, and what he says here is, why is a laptop that can be cutting edge today in 3 or 4 years be considered a piece of junk? He goes on to explain that it's not necessarily just because of the components within the laptop. The laptop doesn't necessarily have to change. It's all of the things around the laptop. The laptop is part of a larger ecosystem of technology as programs advance, as human beings and the way we use computers advance. Older ways of doing things, while they were fine in their time, become obsolete due to the ever-changing nature of the world.
I gotta ask, since the rest of the context is about a failing marriage, this is like kind of his 7-year itch discussion. It doesn't necessarily tie in. He's not wrong about what he's saying here. It's basically, the idea of obsolescence, and as that progresses, but is he talking about it in regards to humanity? Because he doesn't ever really. There's no bridge between those two thoughts that I could see. I'm gonna be honest here. I had to fight to stay focused on this, because it is a lot of the same shit over and over, and I really hate when people repeat things to me.
Well, it's sort of how he gets into, in the next section, tools, obstacles, and extension into the world. He basically talks about how he feels we only view things through the lens of their usefulness or how they might become obstacles to us. And let me read a little bit to highlight that. We assume that we see objects or things when we look at the world, but that's not really how it is. Our evolved perceptual systems transform the interconnected, complex, multi-level world that we inhabit, not so much into things per se, as into useful things, or their nemesis, things that get in the way. This is the necessary practical reduction of the world. This is the transformation of near infinite complexity of things through the narrow specifications of our purpose. This is how precision makes the world sensibly manifest. That is not all the same as perceiving objects. I would argue here this is a bit of a semantics game he's playing. He's essentially...
Oh, really?
He's saying... The things we see are not objects. They are useful objects. We view objects based upon their utility, which is fine.
That's not always true, though.
It's a way to view things, but he treats this as if it is the view.
The first thing I thought of was like, if you see a turd on the ground, are you thinking about ways you can use that turd?
Well, he would argue, you'd argue you're looking at that turd and say, I'm going to walk around that turd. That turd is an obstacle.
I suppose, I guess, but it's in the toilet.
Sure.
I don't shit on the ground. It's just an object to me. It's not a thing that I have to avoid. It's not a thing that I have to interact with. It's a turd. It doesn't even have to be mine.
I think there are better examples of this. For instance, a turd you could say is inherently, at least to the human experience, a negative thing. You want to avoid it. I would
Speak for yourself.
For instance, in my yard, I have a tree. It's not a tree that grows any fruit. It's not a tree that is hindering me. It's
a tree that could turn into a table.
It's just a tree.
A chair, even.
It's benign to me.
You could carve a chair out of it with no moving parts.
However, I still acknowledge the tree, have a word for the tree, and again, like he said, Jordan Peterson would say, this is because human beings are aware of trees, have used trees in their lumber for things.
I think
sure.
it's reductive to the human experience to say that every time we look at something, we are searching for utility within that thing. That's not to say it doesn't happen a lot of the time, but like sometimes something is just a thing we look at and we don't think about that.
I even think it's a very narrow way to look at utility, because the way he talks about utility doesn't necessarily include things like something can be beautiful and that can have a utility.
I was gonna mention art.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. He often does this kind of thing so that he can frame whatever he's going to talk about in very specific terms, again, without making the claim that these things are happening, just setting up the way you're thinking about things in a way that you frame it for him.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
For instance, he says, we see rocks because we can throw them, and clouds because they can rain on us, and apples to eat, and automobiles of other people to get in the way and annoy us. So again, everything is from this perspective of, what can I do with this? How is this helpful to me? How is this a hindrance? Again, it is a way you can look through things.
Absolutely.
It is not the only way.
No, it's very top lobstery of him to assume that, I don't know, all of this is... It reduces us to, like, instinctual beasts, which, I mean, we are at some level, of course. But I guess that we're just so much deeper than that, and I think you know what I'm talking about, probably.
Self-awareness and self-actualization.
And just how we can ponder a certain thing. I don't know, it didn't ring true for me, and I don't think it rings true for you as well. It's not a huge nitpick, it's just something that, like, again, it kind of illuminates the way he thinks about the world in a way that isn't very human. It comes across as very robotic and a level of analysis that I don't think either is constructive nor warranted.
He goes on to say, we see the faces of people we are talking to because we need to communicate with those people and cooperate with them. We don't see the microscopic substructures, their cells or subcellular organelles, molecules and atoms that make up those cells.
That is...
I would disagree, at least in part, because again, we have names for things like cells and cell organelles and atoms and the quarks and various subatomic particles that make them up because we study these things, and not necessarily because they have utility for us today. They might someday. For instance, when radio waves were discovered, the guy who discovered them was asked, what's the practical application to this? And he said, I have no idea. So human beings have this innate curiosity, and certainly you can argue from an evolutionary biology perspective that curiosity is in humans because it pays off.
Yeah, and also facial recognition that he's talking about is an evolutionary trait, so that we can more conducively, I guess, socialize with one another. And he mentions that. But again, it's reductive.
Yeah, especially considering he considers himself philosophical in nature. It seems a pretty non-philosophical way of looking at something. It's very sterile and not really colored with the actual experience of the human condition. When we look at the world, we perceive only what is enough for our plans and actions to work and for us to get by. I completely disagree with that statement. Again, I start not necessarily agreeing with him, but understanding where he's coming from. But then he specifies down to this point of, like, we only see the things that are necessary for survival. That's not true. That's not true at all. People spend lots of time on things that are not crucial to their survival.
How dare you? Everything I do is at 100% efficiency, sir.
Do you only eat meat? Jordan.
Do you only eat meat, saltless, unseasoned meat, and
they
water?
they don't even season the meat?
No, they don't season the meat. Also, what's her name? Mackenzie? Is that her name?
We're talking about Jordan Peterson's daughter.
She's a dietitian. She sent a bikini picture to Jordan Peterson. Here it is. I mean, sure, that's fine, but why are you sending bikini pictures to your dad to prove that you're healthy to people on the internet? Very strange.
Also, if you have to say to someone, do I look like I have scurvy? Maybe your diet's questionable.
Right. Also, all she showed was her cholesterol panels.
Yeah.
Not her, like actual all the blood work.
Not a pirate disease panel.
No, it has no pirate diseases. She might have land scurvy.
Okay. The extensible boundaries of ourselves also expand to include other people, family members, lovers, and friends. A mother will sacrifice herself to her children. Is our father or son or wife or husband more or less integral to us than an arm or a leg? We can answer in part by asking, which would we rather lose? This part highlighting something that Richard Dawkins talked about in The Selfish Gene, his book, which talks about how human beings and other animals, by nature of the fact that we share many genetic traits with the people closest to us, for instance, family members, it behooves us in evolutionary biology to help, even if it involves sacrificing oneself and one's own life and one's own future possibilities for procreation in the evolutionary sense. It can still be beneficial to your genes as a whole to sacrifice yourself to save, let's say, two siblings who share similar genes. It's an interesting read. I'd check it out if you want to learn more about that.
I mean, that's an interesting concept in general that I think the philosophy of sacrifice is pretty cool.
Yeah.
He doesn't touch on it much further than this, which is kind of a shame because that was the first time... Like, that started to pique my interest. I was like, oh, okay, let's talk about this for a little bit. I can get behind this, Jordan. That's fine. It's a cool topic. I'm assuming that you're going to end up going a Jesus route on this, but instead he just stops talking about it pretty much.
Yeah, he just talks about it briefly in the sense that earlier in the chapter he talks about like how when you get in your car, your body and brain essentially consider it a part of you, and when you're controlling it directly. Your body doesn't think of it as I am moving my hand in such a way, it thinks I am moving the car in such a way or some such stuff.
It's like an extension. Yeah, that's kind of this, like, and he gives the example when someone, like, angrily taps your hood. If they're walking past a crosswalk, maybe you park too far out. You get sort of pissed off at that person because it's like an extension of yourself. To some extent, I think I agree with that. I'm sure studies would probably agree with that as well, that, like, when you're driving something, it becomes an extension of you because it does. I mean, as a driver, I think most people drive. It does feel like, you know, it's not super far removed from you.
Sure.
I just don't know how it ties into the rest of the chapter. He, like, abandons these ideas and then just starts talking about interpersonal relationships and how communication's important.
Maybe he's just trying to get you on the same page and say, like, don't you see... Is he really just trying to get that far to say, don't you see the people around you as important? Don't you see the people around you as useful in a
Then
utilitarian
just say that.
sense? I know.
Be precise in your speech.
No, see, he's being overly precise to the extent that he is devoting pages and pages to what can be said in a blurb.
No, I lose interest. Like, I don't know. Until we get to the end of the chapter,
yeah,
I lose interest.
Yeah,
pretty much, because he starts repeating himself constantly.
Yeah.
And none of it really reinforces anything else.
Nope.
And like this is only loosely reinforcing what we're going to be talking about later as far as familial connection, but that's on a genetic level, whereas you're not genetically linked to your spouse.
No.
So I guess I really don't know what he's trying to say, other than like he's sort of like an alien person trying to figure out human relationships.
The world is simple only when it behaves. It is very difficult to make sense of the interconnected chaos of reality just by looking at it. It's a very complicated act, requiring, perhaps, half our brains. I want you to understand what a bizarre statement that is coming from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Other parts in this book, there's an entire, there is a works cited page. There's like a where the fuck did I get this claim from?
Yeah.
He just says, like, just perceiving reality takes half our brains, perhaps.
Just half our brains?
Sometimes he'll just say stuff, and that bothers me. Just wanted to point that out. Like, that's not a statement about the actuality of reality. He might be trying to be metaphorical there, but again, I'm just pointing out with Jordan Peterson, it tends to be difficult to follow, because sometimes he'll just throw out things that might be jokes, might be metaphors. Maybe he's serious.
But the thing is, he never allows himself to get nailed down on which part of human interaction this is. Is it a joke?
Is he not being very precise in his speech?
I have no idea. Like, that's what I mean. Like, it's so hypocritical to be writing this, especially this section, more than any other section so far. Because I'm always wondering what the fuck he's actually talking about. Always. And it's not because I have a hard time comprehending what he's... Like, I comprehend this. It's just that in context, it's like, it's separate.
Sometimes it's vacuous. Sometimes it's...
Right.
It's a poorly drawn analogy. Sometimes it's just a joke that doesn't land.
Sometimes it's just dropped in there for, like a non sequitur.
Yeah. He continues, a car, as we perceive it, is not a thing or an object. It is instead something that takes us somewhere we want to go. It's both. It's all of those things. Again, I don't know why you're acting as though... he plays these semantic games. That's what he likes to do. Your car is not an object.
It's an extension of oneself as we travel through the metaphorical substrate of culture on the highway of life.
If this helped further even a point he was trying to make, whatever. But it doesn't. He's just being weird again.
Yeah. Maybe he saw Cars.
Maybe.
He was like, wow.
Why is he Owen Wilson?
Look at that, because Owen Wilson is the Cars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I forgot about Cars. Sorry.
There's 3 of those movies.
I choose...
Mater. Mater's a tow truck. Those are the things I know about Cars. Mater?
And he tows. He's a tow mater.
Yeah, that's the joke.
Oh, did they make that joke in the movie?
Of course they make that
I
joke.
saw Cars once when it came out. That's probably where I stole that joke accidentally.
Lightning McQueen.
Yeah.
Ka-chow! He tried to kill himself in between movies.
Well, what are you gonna do?
Well, he didn't make it, so... I mean, he made it. He didn't succeed. Love you, Owen.
He goes on to, you and I are simple only when the world behaves. In this, he brings up cheating again, because this seems... And I understand as a psychologist, he probably has plenty of people coming in saying, oh, my wife cheated on me, my husband cheated on me, whatever. Again, when you're writing a book for the general public, it's not a problem I think the vast majority of people deal with consistently, but it's the one thing he goes back to, like, at least half of the chapters. I don't know. Imagine a loyal and honest wife suddenly confronted by evidence of her husband's infidelity. She has lived alongside him for years. She saw him as she assumes he is, reliable, hardworking, loving, dependable. In her marriage, she is standing on a rock, or so she believes, but he became less attentive and more distracted. He begins, in the cliched manner, to work longer hours. Small things, she says and does, irritate him unjustifiably. One day, she sees him in a downtown cafe with another woman, interacting with her in a manner difficult to rationalize and ignore. The limitations and inaccuracy of her former perceptions become immediately and painfully obvious. Her theory of her husband collapses. What happens in consequence? First, someone emerges in his stead, a complex, frightening stranger. That's bad enough, but it's only half the problem. Her theory of herself collapses too, in an aftermath of the betrayal, so that it's not one stranger that's the problem, it's 2. Her husband is not who she perceived him to be, but neither is she, the betrayed wife. She is no longer the well-loved, secure wife and valued partner. Strangely enough, despite our belief in the permanent immutability of the past, she may never have been. The past is not necessarily what it is, even though it has already been. Again, that's a sticking point for me. The past is what it has always been. Your perception of the past has changed. Be more precise, Jordan. I heard that somewhere recently. I wonder where.
He really likes to talk about this cheating example so much. I don't know if, again, we mentioned in the past that maybe he was cheated on, or maybe he just experiences this a lot in his field. I don't know. But boy, that what you just heard there is the next, 8 pages.
Yep.
Over and over and over. Now, there's going to be some sections in between there where we can bring stuff up, but, this is where he starts to really lose me. He really starts to repeat himself. He just gives different examples of why cheating is crushing to the people that experience it. And it's like, yeah, okay, yes, it does. It feels like a betrayal, and all the things you say are true. Yeah. Can we move on towards the point? You ever been in, a car where an old person is driving and everyone's passing you on the highway and you just wish you could be in one of those cars and get to where you were going to go.
Yeah.
That's how I felt for this whole chapter. Very frustrated.
Here's a good part. What is it that is the world after the Twin Towers disintegrate? What, if anything, is left standing? What dread beast rises from the ruins when the invisible pillars supporting the world's financial system tremble and fall? What do we see when we are swept up in the fire and drama of a National Socialist rally?
Whoa!
Can I point out, by the way...
We went from 9/11 to
No
Nazis?
one calls Nazis National Socialists unless they're trying to denigrate socialism.
Right.
Nazis weren't socialists. They killed the socialists. Anyway, continuing.
Well, the 9/11 and the Dread Beast, what happens if anything's standing? The rest of the fucking the world was standing besides some buildings. Like, the buildings fell over. Yeah. People died. Lots of it was bad. The rest of the world was there. There was no Dread Beast. In fact, there were no monsters at all.
But don't worry, he brings up 9/11 and Nazis so we can segue right into religion. What we perceive when things fall apart is no longer the stage and settings of habitable order. It is the eternal, watery Tuvabu. I probably butchered that, I apologize. Formless emptiness and the Tehom, the abyss to speak biblically. The chaos forever lurking beneath our thin surfaces of security. It's from the chaos that the holy word of God himself, with a capital G, extracted order at the beginning of time, according to the oldest opinions expressed by mankind.
Jesus Christ. Their opinions.
Also, the implication here...
How many box?
Again, he's not being precise, but the implication I get here, being that he's talking about the Christian God, the oldest accounts we have are not from Christians or Jewish people. There are much earlier religious stories from earlier civilizations. Jordan Peterson is framing this as though the earliest stories humans told were like the Genesis story.
Well, and also, did you see that he puts the opinions like, I'm not a real hard line on this. These are opinions of people in the past. However, let me continue on and tell you how correct they are.
It's from that chaos that whatever stability had the good fortune to experience emerged originally for some limited time when we first learned to perceive. It's chaos that we see when things fall apart, even though we cannot truly see it. What does this all mean?
What does it mean?
He wanted to talk about Christianity in this chapter.
Oh, he does it a couple times. He's real good at it.
A couple pages later, he starts talking about you shouldn't let things simmer in your relationships, essentially. He talks about, which I think is good advice, when issues arise and problems arise between you and your partner and there's some sort of issue, you should talk about it because these things tend to pile up. Good advice. Weird that it takes him the whole chapter to get here, and he sprinkles in a lot of other stuff. And on top of that, none of this has to do with being precise in your speech. It's about speaking up and speaking your mind, which is different, and is not saying be precise in your speech is not a precise way to say speak your mind to your partner. No. In fact, I would say complete misnomer of a chapter title.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the thesis after this point is communicate to the person that you're either married to or in a long-term relationship with, or even a short-term relationship with that you want to be long-term, and start up front. Be like, hey, he gives a weird example though, like, hey, your laugh is bad.
Yeah.
That's not going to work out, I guess. Like, that's just not going to work out.
Sure.
You're done. Like, stuff that people can't change, I don't think is good to argue about.
No.
You could bring it up, like, but I don't think it's going to last very long if you go like, hey, you know, when you are happy, I hate you.
He says, this is a good just line, and this is when he's talking about, don't not talk about your problems. Don't ever underestimate the destructive power of sins of omission. Interesting word choice. Very precise. In many households in recent decades, the traditional household division of labor has been demolished.
Oh boy.
Not least in the name of liberation and freedom. That demolition, however, has not left so much glorious lack of restriction in its wake as chaos, conflict, and indeterminacy.
Gender roles are important to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And he thinks that Top Lobster boys should go out and get boy jobs, and Top Lobster girls should go out and get girl jobs. And by go out and get girl jobs, I mean be moms. Be little mommies.
Yep.
And this is this is not good. this is not great, Jordan. And he'll go on for this for a little bit, and he'll say the argument he's making, without saying it, of course, is that like liberal values, equality across the board, women working together in the workplace with men, stuff like that. And again, you're taking him out of context. No, I'm putting him in context by watching all of his other talks about this specific interaction between men and women and the equality and the roles that they play in society.
Yeah.
All of that in context with this paragraph right here says to me that divorce is caused, or in large part, it is a catalyst for divorce.
Yeah.
Anytime that you have atypical, conservative structures in your household, and we ought to revert back to or move toward a more conservative style in order to maintain these relationships, while also telling each other when we have bad laughs. It's a bad one.
Speaking of which, I can put up with it, you think, and maybe you should. You're no paragon of genuine tolerance. They're talking about the laugh here. And maybe if you brought up how your partner's giddy laugh is beginning to sound like nails on a blackboard, he or she would tell you, quite properly, to go to hell. And maybe the fault is with you, and you should grow up, get yourself together, and keep quiet. But perhaps braying like a donkey in the midst of a social gathering is not reflecting well on your partner, and you should stick to your guns. So he's saying,
people with bad laughs bray like donkeys.
By the way, can I point out that every single piece of advice of Jordan Peterson seems to berate the shit out of anyone who is taking it. Not only is your laugh like a fucking donkey, if you don't like that, you're a fucking child. It's like he can't give constructive criticism without being like, hey, and fuck you, buddy. Like,
have we heard Jordan Peterson laugh? Does he just sound like Kermit more? It's kind of like that shit.
That was a little Cleveland from...
I don't know how to do Kermit.
Right.
I only have Cleveland. It's the only voice I can do besides this one.
He's going to talk about why men and women cheat. And it's basically a 90s comedy bit, like, women be shopping, men be...
making bacon.
Whatever.
Bringing home the bread.
What did Mrs. gain when she turned from mistress to maid or mother? Was it a relief when her sex life disappeared? Could she complain more profitably to the neighbors and her mother when her husband turned away? Maybe that was more gratifying secretly than anything good that could be derived from any marriage, no matter how perfect.
So his
argument is, hey, you know how women hate sex? I'm sorry, Mrs. Peterson.
So they're in the relationship so that they can bitch about it and feel like a martyr? This
is such like a weird boomer sitcom mentality. Oh, you know how women don't like sex. Have you considered you're doing it wrong, Jordan? I'm just saying, this is not normal. This is not a healthy way to look at relationships in the first place. But don't worry, women aren't the only ones who get the shaft and are horribly mischaracterized here.
Yeah, no, men are too. So again, it reads like he's done like baseline research on the spaceship flight over to Earth, and he just read book 1. He's like, I get him. And he throws the book back, drinks some tea, and goes into hypersleep until he lands.
Here's what he says about men. What did the husband gain for his part when the sex life at home died? Did he willingly play along as a martyr and complain bitterly to his friends? Did he use it as an excuse he wanted anyway to search for a new lover? Did he use it to justify the resentment he still felt towards women in general for the rejections he had faced so continuously before falling into his marriage?
Incelly a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Jordan Peterson doesn't have a very high opinion of anyone.
No.
Except for probably Jordan Peterson.
I think Jordan Peterson... Oh, Michaela. That's her name. Michaela. Michaela Peterson. Meatstress.
And then he concludes this, like, what they get out of it section with, maybe both wife and husband alike used the opportunity to mess up their marriage to take revenge upon God. The one being who could have sorted through the mess. What Is that metaphorical, Jordan?
So
what's the metaphor there?
The metaphor there is that you need to get marriage counseling with your local pastor.
Basically.
Like, what?
You know, God with a capital G. Perhaps the one being, not
being, capital B being,
who could have sorted through the mess.
What are we supposed to take out of that other than
God will fix your marriage?
God will fix your marriage. Like, come on. I genuinely want to know what the fuck, what you think. Jordan Peterson fans, I know some of you are hate watching. I know that right now there's about a 4-hour-long stream happening where you're watching this right now. What does that mean? No?
So he continues about what you should do in these sort of situations instead of keeping it all pent up. What if she had clearly and carefully confronted the fact of our husband's contempt for her household efforts? Would she have discovered her resentment of her father and society itself, and the consequent contamination of her relationships? I fucking hate Freudian people so much. Oh my god. Knock it the fuck off. Seriously.
This is like a slipstream to woo-woo science.
You know, because women all have a resentment for men.
Do you? Do all women resent men? I think all people might resent some other people. Maybe. I really don't know. I don't know.
It's kindergarten level analysis. It's a joke. He starts the last section with the construction of the soul and world.
Oh, God.
This starts immediately bad. The psyche, open parentheses, the soul, end parentheses. You have trampled over so many definitions here. Again, you're not being precise. You are muddying the waters, seemingly intentionally, to make it more difficult to talk about this subject that you're talking about, because you've now conflated the psyche, a model by which we are understanding the internal workings of the human mind, with a soul, which comes with its own litany of baggage that you should not ascribe to the psyche.
All of which are religious, or at the very least supernatural.
Yes! Don't do that! That's insane! You're a psychologist. Talk about the psychology. Conflating the soul with the psyche, again, it's like Jordan Peterson doesn't understand that there are people out there who are...
Now, someone's going to look up the definition of psyche, probably, and they're going to see the word soul somewhere in there. But he's a psychologist. The psyche is not what that is at that point.
No.
He's talking...
Now is not the time to be flowery, Jordan. Be precise in your speech. When error announces itself, undifferentiated chaos is at hand. Its reptilian form paralyzes and confuses. But dragons, which do exist, perhaps more than anything else exists, also hoard gold. In that collapse into the terrible mess of uncomprehended being lurks the possibility of new and benevolent order. Clarity of thought, courageous clarity of thought, is necessary to call it forth.
So the dragon bit, he doesn't actually believe in dragons. Earlier on, he uses an allegory from a story where a boy sees a tiny dragon, and then people don't believe, and the dragon gets bigger, and then when they start believing in it, the dragon gets smaller. I guess it's an allegory on belief.
Yeah, it's an allegory on like lies and keeping things pent up. The dragon gets bigger because it doesn't get addressed. The dragon is the problems.
I meant belief in the person that's claiming.
I get what you're saying. Sure.
Yeah. It's not great. What else is he saying here, though? Oh, fuck.
This is just
It's just weird.
It's
very Canadian.
We're on the last 3 pages. Fuck it. Okay. What you hear in the forest, but cannot see, might be a tiger. It might even be a conspiracy of tigers.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
A bunch of Alex Jones t-shirt wearing tigers in their woods.
Each hungrier and more vicious than the others, led by a crocodile. But
that's not how animals work.
Hey, this is Jordan Peterson's jungle. It's whatever he wants it to be.
It's like Bob Ross.
Check it out. We're going to be mixing different, biomes as well.
Nice.
But it might be so too. If you turn and look, perhaps you'll see just a squirrel. I know someone who was actually chased by a squirrel. Jordan feels the need to bring up in the middle of his metaphor. You see what he's just...
I fed a pistachio to a squirrel once and it bit my finger, you remember?
Yeah, I think that video's still on my phone somewhere.
It bit me. I didn't die.
Yeah, there's nothing else in
That's
that.
it.
I just wanted
Yep.
there's one more. Be careful what you tell yourself and others about what you have done, what you are doing, and where you are going. Search for the correct words, organize those words into the correct sentences, and those sentences into the correct paragraphs.
That's the first time we address Speak with Clarity. It's on almost...
End of chapter.
It's on almost the last page.
Not very precise.
He could have said that, and we could have had chapters filled with other stuff.
Sure.
This whole chapter could have been everything else, like how to talk to people. So, for instance, if you would like to communicate more clearly, try using simile and metaphor to try to illuminate a complex thought that you have into something more simple that someone else can identify with.
I was almost hoping by the end of the chapter it'd be like, see how it doesn't make sense when you don't stay on point?
Got him.
That was legitimately my thought. I'm like, is he going to fourth wall this? Is this like... He's not that clever. The next chapter...
Well, no, we read the very last... We always read the last
sure.
little bit. So you can confront...
Yeah. Confront the chaos of being. Take aim against a sea of troubles. Specify your destination and chart your course. Admit to what you want. Tell those around you who you are. Narrow and gaze attentively. And move forward forthrightly. Be precise in your speech.
The things he said before, be precise in your speech, were not about speech or being precise therein. They were about make sure that the course of action you're taking will lead you to a place of positivity and not negativity.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with communication on the way there. What?
On the bright side,
yeah.
Next episode we will be on the penultimate chapter.
Ooh.
Don't bother children while they are skateboarding. Of course.
That's the 11th rule. I feel like you promised 12 rules before he had 12 rules.
Maybe.
I don't know if you can tell. Once we hit like chapter 8 or so, there's been a steady decline in the quality of these chapters.
The last chapter name, I'm not going to reveal it right now. I want to keep it a surprise.
Yeah, please don't look it up.
But I'm just going to show you. Do you know what it is?
I don't, off the top of my head, no.
He definitely ran out of, like, what he would call this.
Oh, is that the coda?
No, not the coda.
We will be doing the coda as well.
Oh, we will? Okay. Chapter 12.
That's...
Yes! I know! I know!
It's not the thing! Okay.
So we'll talk about that.
Oh, God,
later.
Jordan. Oh, boy.
This hurts.
Yeah, this is, at this point... You know when you... I don't know. You ever see, like a boxing movie or something, and the hero starts like it's a fight for a little bit, and then at the end he just starts pummeling the other guy almost to death.
Yeah, like in Rocky 4, he does what I call the lead punch. Essentially, Rocky starts punching him, and Drago, the force behind the punch is so much, he's like moving Drago, and he's like walking with him.
I feel like that's what's happening at this point, because there's not, like, he's not coming up with anything. This should have been like 9 rules for life.
He gave up after like chapter 9.
Yeah, 9 rules for life. All right, that's fine. Whatever.
We're basically in the material that should have been cut at this point.
Yeah, it's not great.
So we'll finish that up, and then I hear Jordan is working on a sequel.
Yeah, who's working on Ben Shapiro has done a fiction book.
All of the books he's written.
Well, where he self-inserts. Chapo read a little bit of it. I wouldn't hate reading... Do you guys want Ben Shapiro just fiction? We'll just read it out loud.
Let us know. Here's a P.O. box if you want to send us books.
Send us stuff!
Ben Shapiro books or Jordan Peterson books or whatever. Yeah. He's only written 2 books.
Ben Shapiro?
No, Jordan
Peterson.
So
I don't want to do Maps of Meaning.
I
want to do post-fame Jordan Peterson book. What could he possibly have to say now? Like, it's not going to get better, right? He's so far deeply entrenched into the right.
He was fucking tapped out for things to say partway through this book.
I know.
How is he going to do 12 more?
Is it going to be 12 more? Oof.
So anyway, you can follow us on Twitter at PapaBirdJake, at Hugo Reloaded.
Indeed.
Discord link in the description.
Yeah, the Discord is, wow, what a large community we have.
Patreon link in the description if you want to help support the show.
Absolutely. You can go to twitch.tv/actualjake if you'd like to watch my live streams. I debated Jesse Lee Peterson. I uploaded that pretty much in its entirety here. There was some before and after stuff that only people that got to watch the stream got to see. But yeah, doing that. So
So that's it.
we also do charisma saves.
Yeah.
We're gonna be doing that this weekend over on Unpop. It's gonna be live on the YouTube, and it'll be a lot of fun. It's D&D. If you like D&D, you like that.
So until next time, I'm Hugo.
I'm Jake.
This has been Hugo and Jake. Is that precise enough? Probably not.
I feel like we're very precise. We don't meander a ton, and if we do, it's just fun. It's just fun conversations. Have friends hanging out.
We definitely get off topic. When we're talking about that topic, we talk about it.
You're damn right we do. So, that's Chaplain now, for the record, okay? Officially Chaplain, he's not in disguise.
Chaplin's the only person who's ever had that mustache. Fun fact. That's why everyone out of respect never did it again.
Yep.
Except
Out of respect.
Michael Jordan that one time.
He did, but he's black.
In fairness,
Yeah. Michael's
Michael's allowed to do whatever he wants.